to finally get to this very moment where I stand in front of my microphone and talk about this game. I'm sorry. Out of my Among Us friend group, every single one of us is in college. Hell, a couple of us graduated, even have big girl jobs. No one simply has the amount of time on their hands to get together and play Among Us.
But god damn it.
I don't care that it seems impossible. That doesn't mean I can't try. Just one more time, one final dance together. A mission like no other to get everyone back just to play some Among Us. Ever since July, I've been aimlessly trying to recruit the gang back together, just to relive those pivotal 2020 memories. But no one wanted to join. I had to travel to Florida, to Arkansas, to Canada. When no one showed up to Among Us Thursday, I baited them in with Stardew Valley Tuesday. And finally, what can only be described as this one-way intersection of the stars, defying God's will, we made it happen. And they said that it couldn't be done. They said that it was impossible. An 8-person Among Us stack to ask ourselves, how has Among Us changed in 2024? Well, the short answer is actually not that much.
Okay, it's Zachy. I just saw him. I walked in on him killing Doyle in the top right. It's literally Zachy.
I literally walked in. Okay.
Shut the fuck up, bro!
But under the hood, Among Us has grown into something much bigger than what it was in 2020, especially beyond just that game. So first we gotta look back at what Among Us was and compare it to what Among Us is today.
And before we do that, you guys should subscribe. Please subscribe. Please subscribe if you're watching.
It feels redundant to tell you what Among Us is, so I'm not going to, you loser. It's a social deduction game where you do your chores around a map and figure out who the imposter is through discussion. Or you can play as the imposter and just try and kill everyone.
Get back here.
The game came out in 2018, developed by Innersloth, but it was kind of bare bones. It didn't even launch with online support yet, and it was just a little indie game that only hit a max of 1,800 concurrent players in its first year. And then seemingly overnight, Among Us absolutely skyrocketed in player counts, traction, sales. In 2020, there were 500 million active monthly players. I can't exactly pinpoint just what set this bomb off, but every streamer and YouTuber you could possibly imagine, even James Charles, got in on the craze. And, well, the rest is just history. The state that Among Us was in at 2020 featured 3 unique maps and only 2 roles of imposter and crewmate. Culturally, the game was a resounding success with players across the world and everyone was playing the game, but Innersloth was a tiny development team that couldn't keep up with the sudden explosion of popularity and simply just make a new map within a couple months. It's amazing to me Among Us stayed going for as long as it did without any new content. And when the game started dwindling in player counts is when it started to finally become ironic. I mean, you got the stop posting about Among Us, I'm tired of seeing it, all that ding 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 ding, and the general shape of the little guy, it was a beautiful thing, truly. For a brief time, instead of drawing phallic dinglings in your buddy's notebook, it was a quaint little Among Us. As time passed on, as every popular game tends to be, Among Us started to fall out of irrelevancy. And sadly, it's really because the dev team couldn't keep up with new updates because they were reworking the entire code. Because you see, before the gigantic boom in popularity, Innersloth was working on Among Us 2 with a solid code base to be able to support long-term updates. But after the popularity of the original, they shifted development back onto the OG to update its code and continue adding support. With this eventually became the Switch port and the inclusion of a wheel of predetermined answers so you could play family-friendly styles. Sadly, I think this update did way more harm than good. Unless you're on a call with friends, if someone is playing on the Switch, you're forced to use this, and for a while, the public lobbies had the setting turned on as default. It was kind of confusing, and with the fast-paced nature, you couldn't really argue your point. Just blame people and move on with your day. The implementation was a nice feature to actually get that Switch port, but it really kind of hurt the Steam port. Along with the update also came the Among Us ID garbage, where you had to make an Among Us account and no one wanted to make an account. If I load up my game, the first thing it does is tell me to log in. Low-key, I kind of just want to turn the game off after that. And really, after this update hit, Among Us as a fad started to die down a lot. 2021 was when a lot of the COVID games like Animal Crossing or Fall Guys also took a hit in player counts as the world started to open up again. And then, after a very long drought, Among Us finally launched another map, the Airship, in March of 2021. The Airship was sadly too little too late in the public's eye. I mean, after all that time we got was just one map, and sadly on top of it, the map was kind of booty. It was way too big, and there's these slow-moving platforms set up across the map. It didn't have the same gameplay game feel and flow as the past 3 maps, and the whole design of it felt kind of bloated and honestly random. In late 2021, however, Among Us got hit with another update, a role update. They added new roles like the scientist, engineer, guardian angel, and shapeshifter, and this was a much better update than the airship. It provided much needed variety in content, and it was well implemented. These roles can shake up the balance of every round played, not just the ones on the airship. Throughout 2022, they finally added a friends list and then a brand new hide and seek mode. This was inspired by people making their own hide and seek videos to spice up Among Us in between the long content droughts, so it's cool to see that they actually made it official. The game mode, however, often felt way too hectic and really just wasn't the most fun. You can't hide all that well on Among Us maps, and then on top of that, the entire discussion aspect was just completely removed. Content is content at the end of the day, I guess, but man. It's at this point where Among Us's relevancy really waned, and I stopped playing the game. It used to be so easy to get everyone together for a couple games at night, but now saying Among Us just scares all the hoes away. And as mentioned previously, it took the equivalent strength of literally moving mountains to finally get the gang back together to see what changed in 2024, and surprisingly, it was actually a lot. The most notable difference is immediately apparent, with that being the UI. Among Us got a major overhaul in how the menus look and operate. It looks a lot cleaner and is honestly a much needed facelift. Among Us always came off as amateur because at the end of the day, that's what it really was. The settings tab is what received the biggest overhaul. Among Us has always had a good amount of settings, and now that new roles keep getting introduced, more options just kept getting added. So now everything is just packed away neat and tight. When it comes to music, Among Us has had one song that was the beep beep beep. The loop was maybe like 1 minute long and it was not winning any Grammys. Now it has triumphant cowboy music. It makes you feel like you're singing off into the sunset, and it is really, really bad. It might honestly be worse. It just doesn't fit Among Us at all. While these updates are honestly kind of inconsequential, I mean, they don't affect your gameplay, like the newest map, the Fungal, does. We didn't know anything about the map before playing, but I personally think it's the second best map next to the Skell. It has a nice setting being this beach jungle, and the general setup is nice because everything wraps around pretty well. It's not overwhelmingly big, which was the airship's problem. It's a very nice compact size. The task variety was new, and the mechanic of these spore mushrooms to help out imposters is a really neat idea.
Dewpathier was found dead right at spawn.
Who the fuck killed Matt first?
It only took us one game for us to realize, wait a minute, Among Us is fun. It's always been fun. It's so weird to call Among Us nostalgic, but it literally has this power to just transport you back in time. Before sitting down to play, I had a long day of classes, working from around 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And while I was playing Among Us, everything felt like it had just disappeared. I felt like I was back home in 2020. This beautiful magic just warps us all back in time, and I don't think there's a game that has that power. Nothing is as communal as Among Us. Is Among Us really that beautiful? The sus game? The champion underwear? It's actually been good this entire time? Dear God. Playing Among Us again reminded me how its success just really speaks for itself. It got popular for a reason, and having a game like this during COVID is, I think, what really everyone needed. Innersloth then got so much money that this summer they announced they're creating Outersloth. Not an indie publishing studio, an indie funding studio. They give your game a lot of money to see more original works just get finished. It's incredible they're taking the outpouring success and actually putting it into something that will support this sinking ship of an industry. So far, they funded 9 different games, with some even being unannounced, receiving budgets of $50K to $2 million. So how much money did Among Us make? Well, the last report in 2022 claiming Among Us made $86 million in revenue, and then some outlets claiming $110 million in 2024.
Among Us made more money than I will ever see in my entire life.
So I say they should just continue this absolute gift they have been blessed with. The rise in indie games should be headlined by studios like Outersloth, actual real indie developers with a passion and care for their products, not like Sony or Microsoft. So as we look toward the future of Among Us, there's actually a lot. So let's see. First, they've been updating Among Us VR steadily throughout the year, and it looks like the latest Among Us related project is a TV show. They're making an Among Us TV show starring Elijah Wood, Ashley Johnson, Patton Oswalt, Randall Park. What is going on? I mean, at least it's animation and it's staying true to those Flash origins, but you're really gonna try and make an Among Us TV show? You want me to get emotionally invested in Red Among Us? You want me to tear up when the white crewmate dies in episode 10? And then after reading the character bios, I feel like it's gonna go something like this, where, oh, the black Among Us, hey guys, I love rocks so much, doesn't kill anyone. This guy's gonna be like, hey guys, I love pizza, who's hungry for some pizza? And then the yellow guy is gonna kill him because they're best friends, but he's the imposter. why not make it a couple of YouTube videos? Like, why is this a massive scale CBS production? It's on track to be released in 2025, and that's 7 years after Among Us' initial launch and 5 years after it was the flavor of the month. At what point do you just cut your losses? And as of making the video, they haven't revealed the voice acting yet, which is probably for the better because I just can't see it. You know what? As long as it allows Innersloth to keep making millions of dollars to fund indie games, go for it. And that, my friends, is what Among Us has become in 2024. A very, very small indie game that took pop culture by storm, absolutely exploding in immense popularity. Its success has led to a CBS animated series, as well as allowing Innersloth to fund the future of the games industry through Outersloth. Among Us' success can be attributed to people like you, people that have bought the game, played the game, watched content related to the game, and for me, I'm just more so excited to see what Outersloth can do in the future. But as for Among Us itself,
Never change, old friend. Never change.
and this is the part where I suggest you to play good games, and I've been playing Shadow Generations. It's an absolute banger. But what I really want to suggest to you is to get your buddies from back in the day and try and wrangle up a couple of games of Among Us. It really has this magic to bring you back, or at least that's what I experienced. So thank you for watching, and remember to eat your vegetables.